After Luna's supposed death, the grief that consumed Poppy was not the kind that healed with time. It was the kind that fermented into fury, transforming her sorrow into something far darker. Her world had collapsed in a single moment, yet beneath that wreckage, something else began to grow, a cold, deliberate will to uncover the truth. She refused to believe that her daughter's body could vanish without a trace, or that fate alone could have stolen her from the world so cruelly. Every night, she stared at the last picture of Luna, the glow in her eyes, the quiet confidence that had come only recently, and the doubt deepened until it poisoned everything else. That doubt was what Sheila Carter noticed first. Sheila appeared when the silence had settled thick around Poppy's life, when sympathy cards had stopped coming and everyone had begun to move on. She arrived at Il Giardino one afternoon, pretending it was coincidence, offering condolences wrapped in words that sounded almost kind. To everyone else, Sheila was the monster, the cautionary tale of obsession and destruction, but to Poppy, in that moment, she was the only one who didn't tell her to accept and let go. Sheila spoke a language Poppy understood, pain as a weapon, grief as a map to vengeance. When she talked about losing Finn, about watching him choose Steffi and the Forresters over her, her voice trembled with a truth Poppy couldn't ignore. They were both mothers stripped of their children, women whose love had been twisted into something unrecognizable by the cruelty of others. At first, Poppy convinced herself that this was strategy. Sheila knew how the powerful in Los Angeles operated, how they buried secrets, silenced scandals, and made inconvenient people disappear. If there was anyone who could help her dig beneath the official version of Luna's accident, it was Sheila. But alliances with devils have a price, and Poppy began to realize too late that Sheila's sympathy was not compassion but calculation. Sheila saw in Luna's death a chance to exploit weakness in the Forrester fortress. If she could turn Poppy's grief into a weapon, she might finally tear Steffi's world apart. The partnership began in whispers, late-night meetings, exchanged files, speculative theories about tampered police reports and missing evidence. Sheila provided names and contacts within the criminal underworld, while Poppy traded gossip from the elite circles she'd once brushed against through Bill and Lee. Together, they mapped a conspiracy of silence around Luna's final days. Yet each revelation seemed to serve Sheila more than it did Poppy. The deeper they dug, the more the focus shifted from justice for Luna to vengeance against Steffi, Finn, and the Forresters. Still, Poppy couldn't walk away. Every clue Sheila offered pulled her deeper into the maze. There were inconsistencies, phone records that didn't match timelines, security footage mysteriously erased, and a witness who claimed to have seen Luna arguing with someone near the coast hours before the accident. That someone was described as a man in a designer jacket, one Poppy later learned matched Finn's, a gift from Steffi. When Poppy confronted Sheila about it, expecting outrage, Sheila only smiled and said softly, "Do you see now? The Forresters destroy everything they touch. You and I were not so different." That was the moment Poppy began to sense the trap. Sheila wasn't helping her seek justice. She was rewriting the narrative to feed her own obsession. Yet by then, the two women had already become entangled in something larger than either of them could control. Poppy began to manipulate back, pretending to accept Sheila's theory, pretending to share her hatred for Steffi, all while secretly recording their meetings and gathering evidence. But every time she looked into Sheila's eyes, she saw a reflection of herself, another woman who had loved too fiercely, lost too much, and crossed too many lines in the name of protecting her child. When word reached Poppy that Baker had reopened the investigation, she knew she had to move faster. Sheila, however, had other plans. She started leaking selective pieces of information to the press, framing the Forresters as negligent, stirring chaos. It was a storm designed to isolate Finn, to make him question everyone around him. Finn's guilt over Luna's accident grew unbearable as new evidence surfaced. A falsified report suggesting Luna's death was no accident but the result of a cover-up involving hospital malpractice. It was the kind of lie that only Sheila could manufacture, and Poppy's silence made her complicit. In the quiet of her apartment, surrounded by boxes of Luna's belongings, Poppy found herself talking to her daughter's ghost. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered, though she knew Luna, wherever she was, would not have wanted this. The line between love and revenge had blurred beyond recognition. The woman who had once been gentle, soft-spoken, and maternal now carried the same haunted focus that defined Sheila. Evenly began to notice. Her sister confronted her, demanding to know why she was seen with Sheila, why she was fueling these rumors. Poppy denied everything, but Lee's instincts told her the truth. Poppy was slipping into darkness, and the cost would not stop with her. The breaking point came when Sheila proposed their final move, a staged revelation that would accuse Finn of having hidden evidence about Luna's death, forcing Steffi to choose between her husband and her family. "When she chooses him," Sheila said, "we'll destroy her. When she doesn't, we'll destroy him." It was the perfect plan for someone who fed on destruction, but not for Poppy. For the first time, she hesitated. The thought of turning Luna's tragedy into another pawn in Sheila's endless war made her sick. Yet the lure of truth was irresistible. She needed to know, was there a cover-up? Did Finn really play a role in Luna's death, or was Sheila manipulating them all? In that uncertainty, Poppy made her own move. She secretly contacted Baker, offering him the data Sheila had collected in exchange for the full accident report. What she received changed everything. Luna's death certificate had been filed with irregularities, yes, but it was not Finn who had done it. It was someone within the Forrester legal team, acting under pressure to keep a scandal from reaching the press. And the name attached to the falsified paperwork wasn't Steffi's, nor Finn's, it was Sheila's. She had interfered months earlier, ensuring the case closed prematurely, ensuring Luna would be declared dead long before the truth could surface. When Poppy confronted Sheila with the evidence, the mask finally dropped. Sheila didn't deny it. "You needed a reason to fight," she said coolly. "You were too weak to see it before. I gave you one. You should thank me." The words sliced deeper than any lie. In that moment, Poppy understood that Sheila had never seen her as an equal, only as a prototype, a woman to mold into her own image. But something inside Poppy rebelled. She would not become the monster Sheila wanted her to be. Their final confrontation was not loud or violent. It was quiet, intimate, and devastating. Poppy met Sheila at the same cliff where Luna had supposedly died. The sea roared beneath them as twilight fell. Sheila, calm as ever, spoke of destiny, of mothers who had to be ruthless to survive. Poppy listened, her hands trembling, a small gun hidden in her coat pocket. For a moment, she thought of pulling the trigger, of ending the legacy of pain right there. But when she looked into Sheila's eyes, she saw not power but emptiness. Killing her would change nothing. "You don't scare me anymore," Poppy said, turning to walk away. Sheila's laughter followed her into the wind, a laughter that promised their war was far from over. After that night, Poppy disappeared from public view. Some said she fled to another country, others that she checked herself into a clinic. The truth was stranger. She returned to the coast and bought the abandoned property near the crash site. There, she began her own investigation, not for revenge but for truth. Her silence made her mythic. Rumors spread that she was gathering evidence not only against Sheila but also against the Forrestos, that she was preparing a dossier that could dismantle the entire dynasty. Whether it was true or not, her absence became its own form of power. Meanwhile, Sheila, sensing the loss of control, began spreading new rumors that Luna was still alive. Whether it was a lie meant to lure Poppy back or another twisted truth no one could verify, it reignited every buried emotion. Poppy's grief turned again into obsession. If Luna were alive, if Sheila knew something, she would not rest until she found her. And so the cycle began anew. The same dance of faith and fury, of women bound by blood and betrayal. In the end, the question was no longer whether Poppy could defeat Sheila, but whether she had already become her. The same cunning, the same willingness to manipulate, the same emptiness that grows when love rots into vengeance, these had taken root inside her. The only difference was motive. Sheila destroyed for control, Poppy destroyed for memory. Yet both left ruin in their wake. When the next season began, the camera would linger on a single image, Poppy standing on the cliff, wind in her hair, eyes as unreadable as the ocean beneath. Somewhere behind her, the world continued, Steffi and Finn rebuilding, Sheila lurking in shadows, the Forresters fighting their endless wars. But the focus was on her, the woman who had started as a grieving mother and might now be something far more dangerous. The whisper that ran through Los Angeles was almost reverent. There's a new Sheila in town, but this one has nothing left to lose. The Thanksgiving sun fell over Los Angeles like a golden disguise, its warmth an illusion against the cold currents of suspicion threading through the city's richest families. At the Forrester Cliff House, the table gleamed with crystal and silver, a performance of gratitude and harmony, one Steffi had meticulously arranged to convince herself that the world was still whole. Finn stood by the window, eyes tracing the horizon where the sea met the sky, but his mind was far from peaceful. Ever since the whispers about Luna's escape began circulating, he had been caught in a web of guilt and secrecy that no amount of domestic calm could untangle. He had told Steffi the story was nothing but rumor, the desperate noise of tabloids reviving old tragedies. But the truth, the one that had kept him awake night after night, was that Luna was alive. And worse, she was out there, free, afraid, and possibly coming for all of them. Inside the house, laughter echoed faintly, the forced kind that filled the silence between truths too heavy to be spoken. Kelly ran to greet Ridge and Brooke as they arrived, their smiles tight, their compliments mechanical. Taylor had sent apologies for missing the dinner, citing work in another city, though everyone suspected she simply couldn't endure another evening pretending civility with Brooke. Steffi, radiant in her control, moved like a conductor among her guests, setting the tone, orchestrating the illusion. She poured wine, corrected the lighting, directed every gesture to ensure the evening unfolded without chaos. But chaos, that year, was already en route. When the doorbell rang, it was not at a lull but at the precise moment when everyone had just settled into the comfort of pretending. Steffi turned, expecting perhaps another late guest, Hope, maybe, or Thomas. Instead, a tall woman stood framed by the doorway, her coat still dusted with sea mist, her eyes hollow yet defiant.
It was Poppy.
The room fell silent. Even Ridge, the man who prided himself on composure, froze mid-sentence. Poppy's presence alone carried the weight of scandal, the ghost of a story no one dared fully acknowledge. She smiled faintly, though there was nothing soft about it. "I wasn't invited," she said evenly, "but I believe you'll want to hear what I have to say." Finn's hand tightened around his glass until it cracked. He had hoped, prayed, that Poppy would stay away, that she would not force him to betray his wife tonight. But the look in her eyes told him it was already too late. She knew something dangerous. Steffi, sensing the tension but unaware of its cause, gestured for her to come in. The air grew denser as Poppy stepped forward, her gaze scanning the family portraits along the wall, her lips curving into something between pain and contempt. "It's been a long time since Luna's name was mentioned in this house," she said. "But perhaps tonight is a good time to correct a few lies." Across town, in the modest glow of Deacon's apartment above Il Giardino, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different, or so it seemed. Deacon had set the table himself, determined to create something warm, human, and redemptive. Thanksgiving had always been his way of pretending he was part of something larger than his own broken past. He'd invited Hope and Brooke, believing that maybe this year, the wounds between them could begin to heal. But as he poured the wine, there was another knock at the door, soft, uncertain, but carrying the tension of unspoken danger. When he opened it, the shock nearly made him drop the bottle. Poppy stood there too, her hair windswept, her face pale from exhaustion. And behind her was a man Deacon didn't recognize, older, weary, but with the guarded expression of someone who had seen too much.
"We need to talk," she said.
What neither house knew was that the same story, the same truth, was about to detonate across both dinner tables, splintering the holiday into chaos. Back at the Forrester home, the mood turned brittle as Poppy began to speak. She told them she had evidence that Luna hadn't died in the crash, that she had escaped, that someone had helped her vanish. Every eye turned to Finn, and for the first time, his practiced calm faltered. He tried to meet Steffi's gaze, but the weight of her trust pressed against him like a vice. "Poppy," he said carefully, "you're grieving. We all are. But this isn't the time," she cut him off. "Don't you dare tell me what time it is, doctor. I buried an empty coffin because of you." The words sliced through the room like glass. Brooke's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. Ridge rose, his face tightening, but Steffi stayed frozen, staring at Finn, searching his face for denial, for any sign that her husband wasn't hiding another secret. But Finn said nothing. His silence was louder than guilt. At Deacon's, Poppy's double, a version of herself worn thinner by guilt, sat opposite the man she called a witness. His name was Garrett, a paramedic who had been stationed near the crash site the night Luna was declared dead. His story was the missing piece that tied everything together. He had found a woman alive that night, barely breathing, and had been ordered by someone with power, someone connected to the Forresters, to transfer her quietly, off-record, to a private facility. He'd done it for the money. He hadn't known until later that the woman was Luna Nozoa. Poppy's eyes shimmered with rage and disbelief as he spoke. "You're telling me my daughter was alive and you let them hide her?" she whispered. Garrett nodded, his voice shaking. "I didn't know they'd make her disappear again. They said it was to protect her, that she was a danger to herself." Deacon felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Who paid you?" he asked. Garrett hesitated, then said a name Deacon hadn't expected to hear, Sheila Carter. The room fell silent. Hope's fork clattered to her plate. Brooke's face went white. Poppy closed her eyes, the pieces snapping together in her mind. It wasn't just a cover-up. It was a trade, a manipulation designed to pull the Forresters and the Spencers into Sheila's orbit again. At the same moment, in the Forrester house, Poppy's words reached the same name. "Sheila," she said softly, watching the color drain from Steffi's face. "She's the one who knew Luna survived. She's the one who's been playing all of you." The mention of Sheila's name was enough to ignite every buried fear in that room. Steffi's body stiffened. Ridge swore under his breath. And Finn, his heart pounding, finally spoke. "Sheila told me Luna was alive. She came to the hospital weeks ago, said she had proof. I didn't believe her. I thought it was a trap. But then I saw Luna." The confession tore through the house. Steffi rose from her chair, trembling with fury. "You saw her? You saw her, and you said nothing?" He tried to explain how he'd been threatened, how Luna had begged him not to expose her, how she had seemed terrified, convinced that someone was still hunting her. But the words fell flat against the storm of betrayal in Steffi's eyes. Thanksgiving dinner had turned into an interrogation, every bite of turkey cold, every toast curdled by truth. Meanwhile, Deacon's table became a courtroom of its own. Poppy demanded to know why Sheila would keep Luna alive only to hide her. Garrett's voice cracked as he revealed the last detail. The woman who signed Luna's discharge papers from the private facility wasn't Sheila herself, but someone using a Forrester signature. "It was forged," he said, "but I'd bet everything it came from inside their circle." In the Forrester house, Ridge received a phone call. His face paled as he listened. Then he turned to the table. "There's been a break-in at the family office," he said grimly. "Files are missing." Poppy's gaze flickered toward Finn. "Looks like someone's cleaning up." By the time dessert arrived, the dinner had devolved into chaos. Brooke tried to calm Steffi, who was now openly accusing Finn of betraying their family. "You should have told me," she hissed. "You let her walk free while we buried her memory." Finn, desperate, reached for her hand. "I thought I was protecting you. Protecting all of us." Poppy's laugh cut through the noise, a sharp, humorless sound. "You're just like the rest of them, Doctor. Always protecting the wrong people." At Deacon's, Poppy's phone buzzed. A message untraceable. Only 2 words. She's coming. Her blood turned to ice. Across town, the lights flickered at the Forrester house, a sudden power surge plunging the room into shadow. When the backup lights came on, the back door stood open and a cold gust swept through the dining room. Everyone froze. Finn turned slowly, his breath catching. In the doorway stood a figure cloaked in gray, trembling but alive. The room erupted in gasps as the figure lifted her head. It was Luna. Steffi stepped back, clutching the table for balance. Poppy's eyes widened, a sound between sob and prayer escaping her lips. Finn moved toward Luna, but she recoiled. "Don't," she whispered, voice raw. "You lied to me." Every secret, every deceit converged in that moment. The living ghost of a woman everyone had buried, standing among them like the embodiment of their collective guilt. Luna's eyes darted around the room, landing on Poppy, then Steffi, then Finn. "You all played your parts," she said softly. "But it's not over." Before anyone could speak, a single sound cut through the silence, a metallic click. All heads turned. Poppy stood rigid, her hand shaking, a gun glinting in the candlelight. Her face was wet with tears, her body trembling between love and madness. "They took you from me," she said, her voice breaking. "They made me believe you were gone." Luna reached out a hand. "Mom, please," but the room was chaos again. Steffi shouting, Ridge moving forward, Finn stepping between them. "No one else will die tonight," he said, his voice breaking. The standoff lasted seconds that felt like hours. Poppy's finger hovered over the trigger, her mind unraveling. In her eyes, every face was guilty. Finn, Steffi, Ridge, even Luna, who had returned but not as the daughter she remembered. Finally, Luna spoke, her voice quiet, almost tender. "You can't bring me back by destroying them. If you love me, stop." The words shattered the tension like glass. Poppy's hand dropped. The gun clattered to the floor. Later, when the police arrived and the house emptied into stunned silence, Finn stood outside under the cold November sky, watching as Luna was escorted away for questioning. Steffi sat inside, trembling, unsure whether to feel relief or betrayal. And Poppy, her face pale, her eyes empty, was taken into custody, her mind broken by the very truth she'd fought to uncover. Across town, Deacon extinguished the candles on his untouched table. Hope sat quietly beside him, her eyes fixed on the window. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, a requiem for the holiday that had become a battlefield. By midnight, every family that once believed itself untouchable had been stripped bare. The Forresters, the Spencers, the Carters, they had all fed on lies, and now those lies were devouring them. Luna's return had not brought closure, only a new beginning of reckoning. And as the waves crashed against the cliffs outside Steffi's house, the wind carried a single question into the dark. When love and guilt share the same table, who survives?